Tonight we step into a London that never truly sleeps, only wheezes and sighs beneath its own fog. You stand in a narrow alley off St. Martin's Lane, boots slick with last night's rain, your breath a pale ghost in the gaslit dark. The hour is indecently early, closer to the tail end of night than the birth of morning. Somewhere nearby, a milk cart rattles over cobblestones, and a stray cat performs an opera for one. You're a Victorian postman, and your shift begins before the city even remembers it exists. You probably won't survive this, at least, not without chapped fingers, cold lungs, and a questionable relationship with caffeine. But then again, who in this century does? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug your coat tighter, the coarse wool brushing your chin. It's one of the newer ones, navy with scarlet piping and a shining brass badge that claims Royal Mail service, though in this light it could just as easily say good luck. The fog is thick enough to chew, carrying the sharp tang of horse manure, chimney soot, and yesterday's beer. London's air is a buffet of questionable delights, but you've stopped noticing. At your side, the city is half asleep. You pass shuttered shop fronts and newspaper boys dozing on stacks of headlines. The street lamps burn with the lazy flicker of low oil, and the faint rumble of an omnibus carries from a few streets over. It's 4:15 a.m., the hour when only ghosts, policemen, and postmen are moving. You glance down at the canvas mailbag slung over your shoulder, stiff with frost. It's not full yet. The first sacks from the night mail trains are due soon, steaming their way from Liverpool, Bristol, and Edinburgh. Their contents, millions of words, promises, invoices, and regrets, will funnel through your hands before dawn breaks over Westminster. Your route to the sorting office winds past a row of gaslights that form a dotted path into the fog. Somewhere ahead, you can hear the mechanical cough of a mail cart approaching the central depot. The sound is comforting. Every morning begins with this symphony of clatter and hiss. Every morning, you follow it like a hymn. As you turn a corner, the great facade of the General Post Office looms from the mist, massive Corinthian columns rising from the cobbles like a temple to bureaucracy. It's said the building consumes more candle wax than some small parishes, and tonight, judging by the glow seeping through its tall windows, the rumor feels true. A night porter nods as you pass through the wrought iron gate. His face is half lit, half asleep. "You're early, Jim," he mutters through a yawn, "though your name may not be Jim." "It doesn't matter. Everyone is Jim at this hour." You grunt a greeting, because speaking properly feels like waking too fast. Inside, the echoing corridors hum faintly with movement. A clerk somewhere drops a ledger, someone else curses softly and apologizes to no one in particular. You tread across the stone floor, your boots squeaking just enough to make you self-conscious. The scent of paper, ink, and damp wool thickens the air. Historians still argue whether this particular dawn, London, 1887, was the true peak of the Victorian postal machine. Some say it was a moment when human coordination met industrial muscle in perfect sync. Others insist it was already wobbling under its own success, like a too-tall cake. Either way, you're about to see how much of that machinery depends on the simple act of you showing up on time. You push open a door marked Sorting Hall East Wing, and a blast of warmer, more fragrant air greets you. Tea, tobacco, and wet envelopes. It's a peculiar comfort. The hall itself stretches like an indoor street. Long tables, pigeonhole walls, and a dozen weary men moving as though they were parts of a single great organism. Your friend Thomas waves from across the room, his moustache already glistening with tea steam. "Fog's worse than ever," he says, voice hoarse from both weather and gossip. "Couldn't see my own boots." You shrug. Visibility is overrated. He hands you a tin mug of tea that's strong enough to strip paint. One sip and you feel your pulse reheating. Cheer up, he adds. They say it's clearing by Thursday. You both laugh. It's Monday. A clock the size of a cartwheel ticks from the far wall, and every man in the room steals glances at it. Time is currency here. Lost seconds mean delayed deliveries mean complaints, and complaints mean written warnings in crimson ink. Somewhere upstairs, a supervisor checks his pocket watch with the precision of a surgeon. Your station waits, a wooden counter scarred by years of blade nicks and ink stains, your little square in the great postal hive. You drop your satchel and stretch your fingers, the joints popping in quiet rebellion. Soon you'll be slicing open the first canvas bags, the night mail from the northern lines. For now, you just breathe in the moment, the sound of shuffling boots, the muted laughter, the slow unfurling of dawn outside the high windows. In a few minutes, the sorting hall will erupt into its peculiar ballet, the toss and thud of envelopes, the murmur of addresses, the symphony of routine. You allow yourself one final look toward the fog pressing at the windows. Somewhere out there, London's millions are still asleep, dreaming of the letters you're about to sort. Love confessions, overdue bills, invitations to balls, and telegrams bearing the polite weight of tragedy. All of it flows toward this hall like tributaries feeding a single river. A bell rings twice. The first mail cart backs into the loading bay, wheels squealing, horses steaming. The porter shouts something indecipherable about Liverpool. You roll up your sleeves. And just like that, the morning begins. The iron key is cold in your palm, heavy with authority you neither asked for nor can refuse. You slot it into the lock of the sorting hall's side door, twist, and feel the reluctant give of brass meeting duty. The hinges creak in complaint. Too many winters, too little oil, and the door swings inward on a rush of warm, ink-scented air. Inside, the sorting hall greets you like a beast stirring before its morning feed. Gaslight flickers from tall sconces, their flames shivering in draughts from the loading bay. Shadows stretch long over tables lined with pigeonholes, the slots labeled in looping script: Islington, Paddington, Kentish Town, Clerkenwell. Each name feels like a living thing, waiting for its daily pulse of paper. You rub your hands together, blow into your fingers, and stamp your boots, sending a spray of grit onto the floorboards. Around you, the first wave of postmen drifts in, some humming tunelessly, others yawning so wide it's a wonder they don't swallow the gaslight whole. There's camaraderie in exhaustion. You recognize everyone by the shape of their slump. A clerk with a clipboard approaches, his spectacles fogged from the temperature shift. "Morning," he says, voice clipped like scissors. "Train's late by 5 minutes. Fog at Euston again." You nod, pretending this matters less than it does. 5 minutes in the postal system is like 5 heartbeats missed by a city that relies on letters the way lungs rely on air. A whistle pierces the air. The supervisor's call. You and the others straighten by instinct, the shuffle of compliance echoing off the stone walls. Mr. Fairfax, tall, angular, and chronically unimpressed, surveys his troops. His moustache is the kind that could scratch glass. "Morning mail inbound," he barks. "Be ready at the chute. No loafing. No pipe smoke till first batch sorted." His voice lands somewhere between sermon and artillery fire. You grin to yourself. No pipe smoke, indeed. 2 men to your left are already chewing on unlit stems like guilty schoolboys. Moments later, the distant rumble of wheels approaches, the sound of the horse-drawn mail wagon reversing into position. The double doors at the far end of the hall shudder open. A gust of freezing air bursts through, carrying the scent of soot, hay, and something faintly metallic, railway breath. Then come the sacks. Heavy canvas bags stamped with Royal Mail in faded crimson, their cords sealed with blobs of wax bearing tiny crowns. Each is a time capsule from somewhere else. Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, York. Porters toss them down the chute like offerings to the gods of communication. You step forward to catch one as it lands with a dull whomp at your feet. The sack is warm to the touch from its time on the train, and the faint smell of engine oil clings to it. You heft it onto a trestle table, muscles protesting. 100 letters don't weigh much, but 10,000 do. With a practiced tug, you slice the cord with your sorting knife. The sound, canvas tearing, wax cracking, is oddly satisfying. Out spills a cascade of envelopes, a paper avalanche across the tabletop. White, cream, parchment, even pale blue, each sealed in its own brand of urgency. Ink scrolls tilt at odd angles, some flourished and noble, others barely legible. One envelope lands face up beside your hand, blotched and elegant. The address reads to Miss Eleanor Fairchild, Rosebank Cottage, Sussex, in handwriting so neat you could walk its lines. You'll never know Eleanor, but for a heartbeat, she's part of your morning. Across the hall, Thomas whistles low. From Edinburgh, he calls, holding up a bag nearly bursting at the seams. They must have emptied the Highlands into it. Someone laughs, and someone else mutters, but it's all sheep complaints. The humor is small but vital, coal for the body and the soul. You set to work, spreading letters into piles by district. The rhythm comes back instantly, like muscle memory learned from too many dawns. The scrape of paper on wood, the muffled thud of bags landing, the occasional sneeze from dust rising, it all weaves into the symphony of the early shift. Historians still argue whether this manual frenzy was truly efficient or merely theatrical. Some claim the men of the Victorian Post Office could sort 600 letters per hour by sheer familiarity with addresses. Others suggest the numbers were exaggerated for morale and budget reports. You decide not to care. Accuracy is less important than momentum right now. There's a curious beauty in the chaos. Letters fall like autumn leaves, each one destined, each one unknowable. The pigeonhole wall fills, compartment by compartment, London slowly reassembling itself in miniature before your eyes. Watch yourself, a younger postman warns as another bag slides down the chute. You sidestep just in time. It hits the floor with a thunk that rattles the inkwell on your desk. Nearly took your foot off, he grins. Wouldn't be the worst excuse to stop sorting, you mutter, earning a wheezy chuckle. Overhead, the gaslights hiss softly. Their light pools over tables, leaving corners dim enough to hide a nap if you're careful. One man, old Albert, does exactly that, head resting briefly on his folded arms between deliveries. Everyone pretends not to notice. He's been here longer than the floorboards. A bell rings twice again, another wagon incoming. You brace yourself for the next surge. This time, the porters are slick with sweat despite the cold. Bags from the coastal routes, one announces. And a packet train from Dover, foreign mail. Foreign mail is the glittering prize of the morning. The letters smell faintly of other worlds, faint lavender from France, cigar smoke from Spain, sea salt from God knows where. Some even bear the intricate wax seals of distant offices, little emblems pressed into history. As you handle a thick packet stamped Calcutta, you imagine the miles it's traveled. Steamship, rail, cart, hand. Its paper feels different, stiffer, with a faint aroma of palm oil. Someone wrote this under a completely different sky, and now it rests in your ink-stained fingers. There's something humbling about that. A sudden commotion breaks your reverie. One of the new boys, eager and clumsy, has tipped an entire sack onto the floor, scattering envelopes across the boards like snow. Groans rise. Mr. Fairfax storms over, his moustache bristling with fury. "We sort the mail, Jenkins," he thunders. "We do not kick it into new constituencies." Laughter bubbles up, quickly stifled when Fairfax turns. He glares until silence resumes its rightful post. Then, surprisingly, he kneels and helps gather the letters himself. Even tyrants have moments of grace. Minutes stretch into an hour. The hall grows warmer, louder, more alive. Paper rustles like surf. Boots scuff rhythmically. Somewhere in the far corner, someone hums Rule, Britannia off-key. And through it all, you keep unlocking more than just the building. You unlock a ritual older than most who perform it. A fragile thread connecting morning to morning, life to life, through the unbroken faith that words matter enough to be carried. Outside, the fog begins to pale, thinning into light. You glimpse the first suggestion of sunrise through the frosted windows. It's not much, a smear of gold on the soot, but it's enough. Another day, another flood of human longing, sorted by hand and sealed by habit. The supervisor checks the clock, nods once, and announces, "Tea break in 15. The hall groans its gratitude. You lean back, flex your aching wrists, and watch another bag being wheeled in. It's endless, this ritual. But so, perhaps, is connection itself. You peel off your gloves, flex your fingers, and stare at the faint gray smudges on your palms. Ink, soot, and a bit of paper dust, the holy trinity of your trade. The first rush of mail has been tamed into obedient piles, but the hall still hums like a restless engine. It's the calm before the next avalanche, and you know better than to trust it. Boots scrape behind you. Thomas, ever the optimist, appears with a dented tin kettle steaming like an overworked locomotive. "Tea, my savior," you mutter, holding out your mug. The liquid splashes in, dark and furious, tasting of burnt leaves and determination. One sip and your tongue goes slightly numb. Victorian tea isn't brewed for pleasure, it's brewed for survival. Around the room, the others gather in loose knots. Jackets unbutton, conversations spark, laughter flickers like brief matches in the gloom. You hear snippets, someone complaining about frozen post boxes, another bragging that he once delivered a letter to Charles Dickens himself. "Did he tip you?" someone asks. "Not in coin," comes the reply. "But he gave me a nod that said, 'Good lad, keep civilization upright.'" You snort. That sounds exactly like Dickens. Historians still argue whether the British postal uniform was meant to inspire trust or merely to intimidate. The scarlet piping and stiff collars suggest both. Yours itches terribly, but at least it's dry, unlike your boots. You glance down and see that your toes have begun to steam faintly in the warmth of the hall, as if exhaling the river you walked through to get here. Fairfax, the supervisor, strides past again, checking watches like a man personally offended by time. His pocket chain glints in the lamplight, a metronome of authority. 10 minutes, he calls. Then back to work. His moustache seems to twitch in approval at his own efficiency. Thomas leans close, lowering his voice. "Did you hear the rumor? They're testing new postal badges next year. Says they'll have numbers, not names." "Numbers," you echo. "Like criminals." He grins. "Like progress. Easier for the bosses to track who's slow." You roll your eyes. Wonderful. Nothing says morale like being referred to as Employee 47. The kettle empties quickly. Cups clink, spoons scrape, and the smell of strong tea mingles with tobacco smoke that somehow snuck in despite the posted warnings. A couple of men light pipes near the open loading door, pretending the fog outside counts as ventilation. There's a moment's hush when the mail train whistle echoes faintly through the city, a long, low wail from somewhere near King's Cross. You can almost feel the vibration through the cobblestones beneath the building. That whistle means more bags are inbound. More work, yes, but also more stories, more proof that the world beyond London's smog keeps breathing. You set down your mug and adjust your uniform jacket. The brass buttons catch the weak morning light, gleaming briefly before the next shadow claims them. The hall's walls are streaked with condensation, each drop reflecting a glint of gaslight like a row of tiny lanterns. Your satchel waits nearby, still empty for now. You'll fill it later when the sorting gives way to delivery. For the moment, your world is this: tables, sacks, chatter, tea, and the low hum of routine that feels almost sacred. A sudden shout from the far end cuts through the calm. Foreign mail clerk. Need a translator. You glance up to see a clerk holding a letter written in spidery French. The address appears to be to Monsieur Dupont, near the bakery with the green shutters, London. You can practically hear the collective sigh. Green shutters. Thomas murmurs. In this city. You chuckle. Might as well say the house with the damp. Still, you can't help admiring it. That faith that a letter, barely guided by reason, will still find its way. And sometimes, miraculously, it does. The Royal Mail is a creature of both logistics and luck. A fringe tidbit drifts into your mind. One Thomas once swore was true, that in the earlier days of the post, senders could pay only if the recipient opened the letter. People would write secret codes on the outside, so their loved ones could read the message without paying. You imagine that system surviving in today's world and laugh. The treasury would implode before breakfast. The bell clangs again, sharper this time. Break's over. Fairfax claps his hands, and the men return to their stations with the solemnity of monks filing into prayer. You join them, sliding into rhythm as if your muscles remember before your mind does. Another round of mailbags is being unloaded, smaller this time, but heavier somehow, as though words gain weight with urgency. You slice one open, and out tumble parcels wrapped in brown paper and twine. Some are lumpy, others suspiciously ticking, best not to ask, all marked with postage stamps like tiny portraits of empire. You pick up one parcel, its paper softened by damp. The label reads Mr. Alfred Beach, clockmaker, Camden. Inside, you imagine a gear or spring that's crossed half the country to meet its twin. It's strange to think how many pieces of the city move only because you and your comrades carry their connectors. Don't daydream, hero, Thomas warns, already stacking envelopes with impossible speed. Fairfax can smell idle thought. He's right. The supervisor's boots approach again, slow and measured. You quicken your pace, hands flickering over addresses until your eyes blur slightly. Every name feels familiar now, as though you've met half of London just by touching their mail. The clock on the wall ticks towards 6, the hour creeping forward like a cat. Outside, the city is waking. You hear it faintly. Carts rolling, a costermonger shouting about fresh apples, the slow murmur of civilization beginning its daily grind. And inside the hall, you stand amid its pulse, one cog in a grand, unending mechanism. There's something quietly noble in that, though the ache in your shoulders disagrees. Thomas nudges you, grinning. Bet you a penny Fairfax trips on his own dignity before noon. You smirk. Make it 2, and I'll grease the floor. He laughs, loud enough to earn a glare from across the room. But even Fairfax can't smother that kind of energy forever. The hall's alive again, and so are you, tired, ink-stained, tea-fueled, but undeniably part of something vast. As the next cartload of letters rattles up the ramp, you square your shoulders, lift your knife, and whisper under your breath, "All right, London. Let's see what you've written this time." The next cascade comes in all at once, 5 canvas bags at a time, thudding down the chute like a rain of burlap meteorites. Each hits the floor with that particular, solid whomp that means it's full to bursting. You and Thomas haul one onto the nearest table, fingers slipping slightly on the damp weave. Steam rises faintly where the cold sacks meet the warmth of the hall, and for a heartbeat you can almost smell the countryside they've come from, coal smoke from Sheffield, the salt tang of Portsmouth, maybe even the earthy trace of Wales if you're romantic enough to imagine it. You reach for your knife again, nick the wax seal, and the morning explodes. Envelopes pour out like a paper avalanche, sliding across the scarred tabletop in a shuffling whisper. Some are thin, desperate little things. Others bulge with folded forms or coins sewn into corners. You sweep them into rough heaps, the smell of ink and sealing wax thick in the air. Thomas leans over your shoulder. "Look at that, new postage design," he says, pointing to a crisp stamp bearing the young queen's profile. The penny black may have been the first, but this bright red variant glows like a ruby in the gaslight. Printed in Manchester, they say. 2 whole printing presses running night and day. You nod absently, fingers already flying through the pile. Historians still argue whether stamps were the best idea or the worst. Gave people reason to write more, and reason to complain when letters went astray. Thomas chuckles. You'd think they'd thank us for losing a few. Half these look like trouble in an envelope. He's not wrong. You spot one addressed in an angry, all-caps scrawl. To the man who sold me faulty boots, Covent Garden. You set it aside gingerly, half expecting it to hiss. The hall buzzes again, men calling out districts, tossing letters across the long tables like gamblers dealing cards. The rhythm builds, faster, steadier, until you fall into it completely. Motion without thought, muscle memory turned religion. You can sort by instinct now, hardly needing to read the names. Each neighborhood has its own flavor of handwriting. The florid flourishes of Mayfair, the cramped, ink-saving script of Clerkenwell, the bold, blocky addresses from factory owners in Shoreditch. From the far end, a boy barely out of his teens yelps, "Misprint on this one. Says London, Ireland." Which is it, then? Laughter ripples through the room. Forward it to whoever looks more confused, someone calls back. You grin. It's strange, this affection you've built for the absurd. Every odd letter feels like a small rebellion against the machinery of order that surrounds you. Another clerk brings over a handful of returned mail, letters stamped Dead Letter Office. These are the orphans, the unclaimed, the ones whose names have faded or whose senders forgot to include a house number. You pick one up at random, turning it over in your hand. The ink has bled so much that the address looks like a cloudburst on parchment. Somewhere, someone waits for words that will never come. Thomas notices your expression. "Don't go melancholic on me," he says gently. "They'll get another chance in the next round." Everything does. A tiny comfort, but a true one. You shake off the thought and focus on the steady rhythm again. Pick, read, flick, slot. The letters fall into place like the notes of a quiet symphony. A soft laugh bubbles up from nearby as a man unfolds a misdirected valentine, lace-edged, heavy with perfume, and unmistakably meant for someone else. "Careful, you tease. You'll fall in love before breakfast." He grins. "Already have. With her penmanship." It's impossible not to chuckle. You can almost feel the mood lifting as the light strengthens outside. The fog beyond the high windows has thinned to a pearly sheen, and a few weak beams of morning sunlight sneak through the grime-streaked glass, turning the drifting dust into slow golden snow. A sudden shout breaks the calm. "Incoming parcels. Clear a lane." You step aside just in time as 2 porters wheel in a trolley stacked with packages tied in twine. Some are neat rectangles, others bulge oddly, betraying their fragile or foolish contents. One rattles ominously. "Clockwork," says the porter, seeing your raised brow. "Or so we hope." You laugh, but it's half nervous. Victorian mail has a reputation for surprises. Live chicks, frogs, even the occasional hedgehog wrapped in straw. The rules say you're not supposed to touch the creatures, but of course curiosity always wins. Once had a fellow mail me his own hat. Thomas tells you, leaning close as you work. Swore it'd get home before he did. It did, too. Historians still argue whether the postal system encouraged eccentricity or simply revealed it. You reply. The two of you share a quiet snort of amusement before returning to the dance. As the minutes roll on, the hall becomes a storm of movement. Letters sliding, boots thudding, distant bells marking each passing half hour. You glance up occasionally at the great clock on the wall, its face fogged by age but still dependable. The minute hand edges towards 6, your first real checkpoint of the day. A thin clerk near the foreign mail desk coughs delicately. Got something odd here, he calls. Addressed only to the kind postman who'll know where to send it. Thomas groans. That'll be you, then. You take the envelope and examine it. The handwriting is childish, almost painfully careful. Inside, you suspect, there's a note from some small soul trying to find someone lost. It's moments like this that give you pause, the quiet reminder that all this paper chaos carries living breath behind it. You slide it carefully into the special tray marked to be investigated and get back to work, heart slightly heavier. The final bag of the batch is smaller, easier to handle. You open it slowly, relishing the rare stillness as the others finish their piles. The letters inside are fresh and neatly packed, almost as though they've been waiting for you. One catches your eye, a thin envelope stamped Oxford Press. Inside, a folded circular announces a new mechanical invention, a trial sorting machine designed to automate the pigeonhole process. You read the description and laugh under your breath. A machine that can outthink a postman? Good luck with that. Still, you tuck it into your pocket. Progress, like fog, creeps in whether you invite it or not. By now, the morning hum has softened to a steady murmur. The hall feels alive but not frantic, as though it's reached its natural rhythm. Fairfax, pacing with clipboard in hand, seems almost content, a rare sight that borders on alarming. You take a deep breath, stretch your aching back, and let your gaze travel over the long tables and high rafters. It's beautiful in its own strange way, an empire of paper and purpose, humming beneath the flicker of gaslight. Somewhere in that endless tide of envelopes, love and loss are traveling side by side, all of them trusting the same battered system, and the same weary hands, to deliver them. You brush a bit of sealing wax from your sleeve, catch Thomas's eye, and grin. Another avalanche down, you say. He raises his mug in salute. And 15 more to go before breakfast. You rub your thumb along the edge of a letter and feel a faint burn. Paper can cut deeper than you'd think. The avalanche of envelopes keeps coming, but now the room's rhythm shifts from brute unpacking to careful choreography. Sorting isn't about strength anymore, it's about instinct, speed, and the kind of pattern recognition that borders on magic. You push your sleeves to the elbows and lean into your work. Candlelight flares at your station, the wax guttering slightly in the draft. Gas lamps hum overhead, but they don't reach every corner, and you've come to prefer this half-shadow. It hides the fatigue under your eyes. Letters blur past, each one a small mystery. You barely read them, you feel them. You can tell a Kensington address by the confident tilt of its handwriting, a dockworker's scrawl from warping by its smudged edges and hurried slant. The trick, you've learned, isn't reading, it's recognizing the soul behind the script. The supervisor once told a new hire, don't think. Sort. And he wasn't wrong. There's a moment each morning when your body takes over, the motion so fluid it feels like dance. You reach, glance, flick. Each letter finds its pigeonhole like a bird coming home. You pause only long enough to stretch your fingers. The joints crack like twigs. Beside you, Thomas mutters. Never thought I'd earn my bread by hand-wrestling envelopes. You smirk. Better that than wrestling the public. These letters don't bite. Speak for yourself, he replies, holding up a corner nicked open by sealing wax hardened into a dagger edge. Got attacked by a baron's love letter. A laugh bubbles out before you can stop it. Death by sentiment. He grins through the fatigue. The laughter helps. It always does. Historians still argue whether Victorian postmen had photographic memories or merely fast reflexes. You suspect it's a little of both. After all, you know half of London by name. Streets, courts, mews, alleys, even the ones that technically don't exist anymore. Old maps in your mind shift like living things, expanding each time a new address crosses your table. A new boy at the far end drops a handful of letters, cursing softly. You glance over and recognize the look, overwhelmed or mixed with mild panic. Everyone has that moment, the realization that the postal network is less a system and more a living creature with arteries of ink and nerves of wax. Take it slow, you call gently. The mail will outlast you anyway. The hall chuckles, because it's true. It always does. A small clock ticks somewhere behind you. Not the grand one on the wall, but a pocket watch lying open beside your stack. Its steady pulse is oddly comforting. Time keeps order when minds start to wander. You pick up a letter and pause. The handwriting is unusual, delicate but deliberate, like someone painting with a quill. The address reads, Mr. Percival Gray, Esquire, watchmaker, Limehouse Basin. You remember sorting one to him last week. You imagine a tiny shop full of ticking clocks and grease-stained tools. It feels strangely intimate, knowing his name without ever knowing his face. That's the secret no one tells outsiders. Sorting isn't impersonal. You start to care, in tiny, invisible ways. The candle on your table hiccups and flares brighter. The air smells of tallow and ink and the faint ghost of tea from earlier. Your fingers move automatically now, sorting faster, smoother. The envelopes whisper as they slide into place. From the corner, an older sorter named Briggs hums under his breath, a slow sea shanty from his Navy days. His rhythm sets the pace for half the hall. One by one, others pick up the tune until the room hums with quiet harmony, a choir of sleep-deprived postmen keeping time with history. Bit of song never hurt the Queen's mail, Briggs says without looking up. Unless it's out of tune, Thomas adds. You grin. The light humor holds the exhaustion at bay. It's a kind of spell work, the laughter, the humming, the steady motion. You shift your stance, feeling the boards creak beneath your boots. The hall smells slightly of warm wood and cold iron. Gaslight trembles on every metallic edge, the sorting knives, the brass buttons on uniforms, the mail chutes gleaming faintly as new bags wait in the wings. The faint tick of your pocket watch syncs with the rhythm of your hands. You imagine yourself as part of some great machine, cogs, levers, pistons, and for once, the metaphor feels kind rather than cruel. Machines break down, but they are predictable. People, less so. You glance up just as Fairfax makes his slow patrol down the line, inspecting the work with the scrutiny of a hawk. His boots sound measured, his clipboard steady. You swear the man's moustache twitches in time with his heartbeat. He stops by you, looks at your table, and nods once. Approval. The rarest currency here. Thomas whispers, frame that moment, will you? You shrug. He probably meant it for the candle. Still, you can't help feeling a little pride. Somewhere near the back, a crash echoes. Someone's dropped an entire tray of mail. The room groans as if struck collectively. Fairfax sighs audibly and turns on his heel. You smirk behind your sleeve. Guess the approval was temporary. A new letter slides under your hand, foreign, by the look of it. The stamp bears an unfamiliar emblem, the paper smoother than British stock. The address is written in elegant Italian, Signora Bellini, for Rue de Marlborough, London. You wonder how many languages have passed through your fingers without you even noticing. Thomas leans over. Ever think about what's in them? These letters. You shrug, eyes still flicking from one envelope to the next. Sometimes, but mostly, I think about where they are going. People send pieces of themselves through us. We're like, what do you call it? Blood cells in London's veins. He whistles softly. That's poetic. Might want to patent that before the poets do. You smirk. They'll just send me the royalty notice in the mail. For a moment, the work slows as laughter ripples through the hall again. It's small, but it's enough to keep everyone upright. Then the next batch arrives, fresh, heavy, insistent. The flood never ends, but you've made peace with that. Each letter you place feels like a tiny victory against chaos. The candle beside you gutters, shrinking low, but you don't relight it. The first edge of dawn now filters through the grimy panes above, pale and weak but steady. The light catches dust motes in midair, turning them to gold. You wipe your forehead with the back of your sleeve, leaving a faint streak of ink across your brow. For a heartbeat, you pause, just long enough to listen. The sorting hall breathes. It's not a metaphor, it truly does. You hear the collective inhale and exhale of dozens of men, the steady shuffle of boots, the soft clack of envelopes sliding home. It's an organism, and you're part of it. You smile faintly to yourself and reach for the next stack. The paper's cool and smooth under your fingertips, the handwriting elegant, the promise inside unknown. Outside, the city stirs. Inside, you keep sorting. The light from the grimy windows creeps higher across the tables, turning every smudge of ink into a tiny mirror. Your candle gutters out with a last brave hiss, and you don't bother to relight it. Daylight, thin, grey, reluctant, is beginning to win. Somewhere upstairs a bell chimes once, and the next phase begins. The early clamor settles into its more deliberate rhythm. Less shouting, more muttering, more of the soft percussion of envelopes meeting pigeonholes. You roll your shoulders and glance across the hall to the new curiosity, a waist-high contraption of polished brass and wood that's been rolled in on a trolley. Mechanical sorter, Thomas whispers, appearing at your elbow with a grin. Brought down from the workshop for trial. Promised to sort 1,000 letters in an hour. You raise an eyebrow. Promised by whom? The fellow who built it, naturally. Inventors always round up. The machine gleams proudly in the light, all cranks and hoppers and hopeful gears. Its inventor, a wiry man in a soot-stained waistcoat, stands beside it, winding a handle with theatrical confidence. The postmen gather like schoolboys around a magician. Gentlemen, the man declares, you are about to witness the future of correspondence. He feeds a handful of letters into the top chute. There's a whir, a click, a groan, and then a magnificent sputter as the machine spits the letters back out in random directions. One flutters into a teacup, another under a boot. The hall erupts in laughter. Thomas claps his hands. The future's got a fine sense of humor. Even Fairfax allows the faintest of smiles before restoring order. Back to your stations, he says. Let the contraption find its dignity. You return to your pile with a chuckle. For all the talk of progress, it's still human hands that keep the empire's messages flowing. Machines can clatter, people can care. That's the difference. Historians still argue whether those first mechanical sorters ever worked as intended. Some claim they shaved minutes off the process. Others swear they only added noise and confusion. Judging by the inventor's blush, you'd cast your vote with the latter. You run your fingertips along the pigeonhole wall. the wooden dividers smooth and darkened by years of contact. Each slot has its personality, the deep ones for distant towns, the narrow ones for city streets. The labels, written in careful script, are miniature portraits of the country itself: Manchester, Bristol, Bath, York, Leeds. A geography of ink. It's a comfort, this tactile world. Machines lack smell, texture, warmth. You can't imagine trusting them with a widow's letter or a soldier's farewell. Beside you, Briggs the veteran hums again, a slow tune about sailors and long voyages. His sorting knife moves in time with the beat, slicing open back chords as if conducting an orchestra. "They'll try to replace us one day," he says, voice gravelly. "Mark my words. Steam, electricity, little gears doing all the thinking." You grin. "And what'll we do then?" He shrugs. "Sort the gears, maybe." The hall ripples with quiet amusement. You take up another stack, thick envelopes this time, edged with wax seals so ornate they look sculpted. Lord Lonsdale, House of Commons. The Admiralty, Whitehall. Royal Mail Treasury Department. Even from here you can smell the polish of power. Each letter weighs a little more, though you suspect that's imagination. As you sort them, your mind drifts to the system that makes it all possible. Trains thundering through night tunnels, riders galloping down lanes, clerks hunched over ledgers by candlelight. The network stretches from London to the smallest hamlet in the Hebrides, and somehow, through fog and folly, it works. You've heard it said the post office is the nervous system of the empire. If that's true, then this hall is its beating heart. The door opens again, and a draft rolls through carrying the city's scent: soot, coffee, damp stone. Outside, the traffic has started. You can hear the faint clop of hooves, the rattle of wagons. Morning is catching up to you. Thomas nudges your shoulder. "Ever think we're sorting more than letters?" he says quietly. You tilt your head. Meaning? Meaning, all these bits of paper, they are pieces of lives. Promises, lies, apologies, maybe even confessions. We're like priests who never read the sermons. You smile. Better that way. Too much knowledge might slow us down. He laughs softly. True. Ignorance is efficiency. The machine in the corner wheezes again, as though wounded. A small puff of steam escapes from a valve. The inventor, undeterred, announces he will improve the feed system. Everyone nods politely. Your attention drifts to a letter that has no address, only a symbol, an elaborate crest pressed in silver wax. Curious, you hold it up to the light. The emblem shows a bird clutching an envelope in its beak, wings spread. "Know this seal?" you ask Thomas. He frowns. "Could be one of those secret societies. There's dozens: temperance men, natural philosophers, even ghost chasers." You raise an eyebrow. "Ghost chasers?" He grins. "Society for Psychical Research, they call themselves. Claim they've written to the dead." You laugh. "And do the dead reply?" "Not through us, I hope," he says, and both of you glance at the pile of undelivered letters. For a moment the joke hangs between you, equal parts funny and unnerving. The hall fills again with motion. Fairfax walks by with his clipboard, noting times, quantities, the flow of work. He doesn't need to shout anymore. The rhythm has found itself. You notice how your own movements have changed. At the start of the shift, each action felt deliberate. Now it's almost graceful. You don't read addresses, you sense patterns. You don't see paper, you see movement. A stray thought crosses your mind. This is what mastery feels like. Quiet, unnoticed, but real. A whistle from the far corner signals that the sorting for inland districts is nearly done. Another team begins bundling mail for the western counties, stacking it in neat towers bound with red twine. The sight is oddly satisfying, like watching order triumph over entropy. And through it all, the mechanical sorter continues its noisy performance, spinning, clanking, spitting out letters like an opinionated parrot. Thomas leans over, whispering, "Reckon it'll take your job?" You smile. If it learns sarcasm, maybe. Outside, a shaft of sunlight finally pierces the window grime, landing squarely on your hands. The ink stains gleam briefly, proof of work honestly done. You think of the thousands of unseen hands across the country doing exactly this, each a small node in a vast web of connection. In that moment, you understand something the inventors may never grasp. The postal system isn't powered by machines, or even by trains, it's powered by faith. Faith that words will find their way, that someone, somewhere, will care enough to send them. The inventor curses softly as his device jams again. You can't help but grin. "Don't worry," you call over. "We'll deliver your resignation when you're ready." A ripple of laughter follows. The morning continues, brightening by degrees, and your fingers keep moving, human and fallible and entirely irreplaceable. You reach the point in the morning where time becomes elastic. Minutes stretch and snap back without warning. The light outside is full now, pale, directionless, the kind that makes everything look slightly tired. The hall hums like a beehive, and you're deep in the rhythm when you find it, a letter that refuses to belong anywhere. The handwriting is erratic, the ink blotchy, the paper slightly warped as if someone had written it in the rain. You turn it over. No return address. The postmark is half missing, the town's name smudged into a dark bruise of ink. All it says is "To my brother, somewhere near the Strand." You blink. Somewhere near the Strand? That's like saying somewhere near air. Thomas glances over and whistles. "Good luck, detective." More like archaeologist, you mutter. You study the handwriting again, each loop, each uneven stroke. Sometimes a clue hides in the slant of a Y or the pressure of a dot. You've seen letters from illiterate sailors who dictated their words to tavern scribes, and you've seen ones from aristocrats whose penmanship could curdle milk. But this one feels personal, urgent, even. The paper carries a faint smell, sea salt, or perhaps cheap cologne trying to disguise it. There's a small department for such things, the dead letter office, where mysteries like this one go to die, or, occasionally, resurrect. You've never been there yourself, but you've heard the stories, rooms stacked with unclaimed love letters, unopened parcels, and envelopes that crossed oceans only to lose their way on the last street. "Send it up for tracing," Thomas suggests. You hesitate. Feels wrong to give up so soon. He raises an eyebrow. "What? You'll divine the address through intuition?" "Through pure stubbornness," you say. He laughs. "That's the spirit of the post office." You scan the ink again and spot something faint, a watermark in the corner, just visible when you tilt it toward the window. The letters HM Dockyard. Aha. So perhaps the writer was naval, or at least worked near one of the Thames docks. That narrows it down from the whole city to, say, half of it. Progress. You glance toward Fairfax, who's occupied berating the inventor's latest machine mishap. Perfect. You quietly set the letter aside in a little special cases pile, a small rebellion against bureaucracy. Historians still argue whether the Victorian dead letter office was a place of tragedy or quiet heroism. Some claim it was the graveyard of communication. Others call it the unsung cradle of detective work. You suspect it was both, a testament to how fragile direction can be when written by hand. You return to the flow, but the lost letter lingers in your mind. There's something haunting about a message without a home. A few minutes later, another oddity lands on your table, a heavy envelope sealed with dark green wax. The emblem is unmistakable, the crest of the royal household. Thomas notices and whistles low. You're touching royal correspondence, mate. Don't sneeze. I'll try not to scandalize the monarchy, you reply dryly, sliding it into its proper slot. The paper's texture is so fine it almost hums beneath your fingers. You wonder who wrote it, a clerk, perhaps, or one of the palace's endless minor officials. The words inside are none of your business, but you can't help imagining. Maybe it's a summons. Maybe it's just about cake. Royalty has to eat too. You get back into rhythm. Your fingertips, blackened with ink and wax dust, move almost automatically. A few letters down, something else catches your attention. A postcard from Brighton, bright pink with a cartoonish illustration of a bathing machine. The message scrawled on the back reads simply, "The sea's too cold and the company worse." You chuckle. Well, at least someone's honest. Thomas cranes his neck. Is it rude? Only mildly. I've seen worse. Oh, do tell. You grin. Let's just say Victorians pretend to be proper until they discover postcards. Then all bets are off. It's true, too. Picture postcards are a relatively new craze, and with their cheap printing and lax censorship, they've become the favorite outlet for all manner of cheeky remarks. One made the rounds last week showing a postman caught in the rain with the caption, "Neither snow, nor sleet, nor modesty deters him." The lads laughed about it for hours. You glance at the unsorted pile and sigh. Funny thing, though. We move all these messages, yet we never write them. Thomas nods. Maybe we don't need to. We're already part of every story, just unseen. A fair point, and oddly comforting. The clock on the far wall ticks towards 6. Soon the first wave of delivery postmen will begin loading their satchels. The urgency creeps back into the room. More movement, louder voices, faster hands. You quicken your pace. But your mind keeps drifting to that lost letter. Who was the brother? Did the writer ever find him? Or will some clerk months from now read the envelope, sigh, and toss it into a pile marked "Return to Sender"? You shake yourself free of the thought, but it clings like dust. You pick up another misfit, this one addressed simply to Clara, the girl at the bakery, Covent Garden. You stare at it for a long moment. There are a dozen bakeries in Covent Garden, and probably 2 Claras in each. Thomas leans over. Another mystery. You show him the envelope. He grins. Romantic fool, whoever he is. Do we send it to the dead letter office too? He thinks for a moment. No. Send it to the General Post Restante desk. Maybe she'll come looking. You do, tucking it carefully aside. There's something sweet about that, hope clinging to possibility. A few minutes later, Fairfax's voice cuts through the noise. Sorters. Last call for the 6 o'clock dispatch. The hall erupts in a flurry of motion. You and Thomas grab your final stacks, sliding them home with a satisfying rhythm. Your back aches, your fingers sting, but the work moves like a current pulling you forward. For a fleeting moment, you imagine the lives behind each address. A mother waiting by a window in Bristol, a soldier pacing a barracks in Portsmouth, a shopkeeper opening a sealed order in Manchester. You realize that though the letters are made of paper, what you're really sorting is anticipation itself. The bag for special cases sits quietly at the corner of your table. The lost letter, the one to Clara, a few others that refuse to fit the system. You tie it with twine and tag it neatly, to be traced. You'll send it up later, but part of you wants to keep them. They feel like stories still waiting to be told. Thomas yawns. That's it for this round. Next bag's in 15. You stretch, feeling your spine complain. The dawn outside has softened into a milky gold now. Somewhere in the street, a horse snorts, and the sound makes you smile. You glance at the smudged envelope one last time before sliding it into the tracing pile. "Good luck, brother," you murmur. "Hope you find your way." Then the next whistle blows, and the mountain of mail begins again. The clatter in the hall eases for a moment as the first bags are sealed, tagged, and stacked for dispatch. You rub your sore wrists and take a sip of lukewarm tea that's somehow still bitter enough to taste like burnt wire. Thomas, sitting opposite, is pretending to read the label on a tin of biscuits as though it were literature. "Royal approved since 1846, he murmurs, squinting. "Do you think Her Majesty actually eats these things?" You shrug. If she does, she probably dunks them in something fancier than this tea. The two of you share a grin, and then the next wave begins. Bags marked private and confidential, each to be handled by the senior sorters only. The fabric feels different. Finer weave, cleaner seals, less of the damp, sweat-soaked smell that clings to ordinary correspondence. Fairfax unlocks them himself, one by one, like a priest revealing sacred relics. "Mind your handling," he warns. "Some of these are from Parliament and the Palace." Thomas leans close, voice low. "Ah, the gossip mail." You smirk. "The kind that could start wars or marriages." He raises a brow. "Sometimes both." Inside, the envelopes gleam white and gold under the lamplight, the wax seals unbroken, the handwriting immaculate. You can almost feel the weight of privilege in the paper itself. There's a letter addressed to the Right Honourable Viscount Abernathy, House of Lords, another to the Duchess of Portland, Grosvenor Square. You wonder whether the people who write them ever think about the soot-stained fingers that carry their secrets. Historians still argue whether postmen were ever tempted to peek inside such correspondence. You don't need to debate it. You know the temptation exists, but so does something stronger, the quiet pride of restraint. The Queen's mail passes through your hands, that's enough. Still, curiosity has its ways. Near the bottom of the pile, you find a letter wrapped in unusual crimson paper, sealed with a wax stamp showing a coiled serpent. The handwriting is flamboyant, almost theatrical, to Mr. Wilkins, the stagehand at the Haymarket Theatre. Thomas notices your pause. "What's that? Looks scandalous." You grin. "Or artistic. Hard to tell the difference." You turn it over, careful not to damage the seal. "Do we have a code for questionably dramatic correspondence?" "Not yet," he says. "Maybe we should start one." You slot it into the Westminster tray, wondering if it contains a secret romance or a stage prop order. With the theatre crowd, either is equally likely. The next envelope you pick up is simpler, cheap paper, faded ink, but the message on the outside makes you laugh. Scrawled across it are the words, "If this reaches her, I'll believe in miracles." Thomas peers over your shoulder. Blimey. Someone's either in love or in debt. "Same thing sometimes," you mutter. You place it gently in its slot anyway. Let the system have a chance to prove him right. Fairfax strides past, clipboard under one arm. "Mind your pace, lads. London won't post itself." You salute him lazily. He doesn't see it, but Thomas nearly chokes trying not to laugh. By now the hall is alive again. The smell of sealing wax fills the air, sweet and faintly metallic, like burnt honey. One clerk moves along the rows with a portable heater, melting wax for the morning dispatches. The scarlet drops fall like blood, quick and precise, sealing the government's secrets shut for another day. Your hands ache. The candle stub beside you has burned into a puddle of wax that clings to your sleeve. You brush it off absently and reach for another pile. This one postcards, bright and ridiculous. One shows a cartoon of a stout postman holding an umbrella made of envelopes. Caption, "Sheltered by duty." Another features two ladies with scandalously visible ankles walking along Brighton Pier. The caption reads, "Weather fair, morals fairer." Thomas wheezes with laughter. "I swear these postcard printers are going to bring down civilization." "Not before the telegraph does," you reply. "Once everyone can gossip instantly, we're finished." He leans back with mock solemnity. "Ah, the death of romance. When messages arrive before you've had time to regret sending them." You grin. "Then again, imagine delivering a scandal in seconds. There'd be no need for us to run." "Speak for yourself," he says, flexing his sore knees. Historians still argue whether the postcard craze of the 1890s truly changed communication or just made it more mischievous. Judging by the pile in front of you, half of them jokes, the other half flirtations, it's safe to say it did both. Fairfax circles back again, inspecting the stacks. "Careful with those royal seals," he reminds you. "Any damaged wax will be investigated." You nod obediently, but as he moves away, Thomas mutters, "He talks like we're sealing state secrets. Most of these are probably invitations to luncheons." You chuckle. Never underestimate a luncheon. Wars have started over cucumber sandwiches. He stares at you. "You're joking, right?" You grin. "Mostly." By now, the pile of special mail is dwindling. Each letter you sort feels strangely personal, like a brush with another world, one of gilded drawing rooms, perfumed ink, and private codes. Yet the next envelope, cheap and creased, jerks you back to reality. It's addressed to Mr. Frederick Jones, care of the Street Giles Workhouse. You pause for a moment. The handwriting is trembling, uncertain. The return address simply says Mother. The contrast between this and the embossed royal stationery makes something in your chest tighten. You handle it carefully, almost reverently, before placing it in its slot. Thomas sees your expression. Hard to tell which mail matters more, eh? You nod. Exactly. Same ink, same paper, different worlds. The hall quiets for a moment, just the sound of envelopes sliding into place, the faint scrape of boots on the wooden floor. Then the outer door bangs open, and a gust of wind sweeps through. A telegraph boy stumbles in, cheeks flushed, cap askew, holding a sealed pouch. "Dispatch from Buckingham," he calls, panting. Fairfax takes it without missing a beat. "Thank you, lad." The boy salutes and runs out again. Thomas mutters, "Imagine being that fast. Makes us look lazy." You laugh. He's powered by panic. Entirely different fuel source. Fairfax opens the pouch and withdraws a short note. "Urgent. Her Majesty's correspondence to be prioritized for immediate sorting." A groan ripples through the hall. Thomas sighs. "We're about to become royal servants again." You stretch your sore fingers and grin. At least the Queen doesn't bite. Usually. He snorts, nearly spilling his tea. The new mailbag arrives, small but heavy, embroidered with a golden crown. You take your share and begin, each letter flawless, the wax unblemished. It's a strange feeling, handling something destined for hands that sign decrees, attend operas, or host ambassadors. And yet here you are, in a soot-streaked hall, giving it passage. There's an odd comfort in the equality of envelopes. Once sealed and stamped, every letter looks the same, royal, romantic, desperate, dull. The postman doesn't judge, he simply delivers. You glance at Thomas. You ever wonder if she... He interrupts. "The Queen." You nod. Ever reads them all herself? He shrugs. Historians still argue whether she even writes half of them. You smile faintly. Maybe some clerk answers in her stead, and the world never knows. "Wouldn't surprise me," he says, tossing an envelope into its slot. The Empire runs on invisible ink. The hall bell rings again. 6:30. Outside, London is fully awake now, hooves clattering, vendors shouting, windows flung open to let in air that's already full of soot. You can feel the shift, the city's pulse rising to meet the morning. You tie off your last bundle of letters, dukes, duchesses, stagehands, and workhouse sons all tangled together, and set them on the cart for delivery. For a moment, you just watch the stack. It's absurdly beautiful, the whole spectrum of society reduced to uniform rectangles of paper, waiting to be carried out into the streets. Thomas stretches and sighs. Right, breakfast time before the next round. You nod, rubbing your aching wrists. If the tea's still warm and the biscuits still technically edible, I'll call it a victory. The two of you head toward the small break corner, leaving behind the whisper of letters, royal and rude alike, rustling softly in the draft. The clock strikes 6 with a clanging finality that seems to echo through your bones. Every postman in the hall looks up, some with relief, others with dread. It's the signal that the final push is here. The mail must be bundled, tied, and ready before the delivery rounds begin. There's no grace period, no extension. The city waits for no one. You stretch your back, hear it pop like old timber, and grab a fresh roll of twine. The bundles in front of you are like miniature cities, each tied by district, each with its own tempo and personality. Westminster mail smells faintly of sealing wax and ambition. Whitechapel's is damp and smudged, full of gossip and overdue bills. You loop the twine, knot it tight, and slide the stack down the long table toward the loading area. A rhythmic thump accompanies each bundle, an unspoken countdown. The room, usually full of chatter, is now a symphony of small sounds, paper rustling, boots shifting, breath hissing through teeth. Thomas appears at your side, cheeks flushed. How are your fingers still attached? They aren't, you reply dryly. They're working purely on habit. He chuckles and tosses you another stack. In that case, your habits are heroic. You grin, but there's no time for banter. Fairfax paces down the center aisle like a conductor, tapping his clipboard against his palm. Keep it moving, gentlemen. 6:15 departure means 6:15. Historians still argue, Thomas mutters under his breath, whether Fairfax was born punctual or simply wound that way. You stifle a laugh and get back to work. The clock's hands creep forward with malicious speed. The last sacks are being hoisted toward the carts outside, their canvas sides bulging with the morning's burden. You pause only once, to flex your aching hands. The rough hemp twine has left faint indentations in your skin, tiny proofs of labor, invisible to anyone outside this hall. You think of the people who'll never know the choreography that brings their mail to their door, the endless sorting, sealing, bundling, and sprinting against time. Mind the ribbons. Fairfax calls out sharply as someone knots a bundle too loosely. The last thing London needs is its secrets scattered down Fleet Street. Thomas snorts. As if Fleet Street doesn't print worse every morning. You grin and slide another bundle onto the cart. A new smell creeps into the air, fresh ink and leather. One of the delivery men, early and impatient, stands at the door with his satchel slung over one shoulder. He's younger than you, eyes bright with the naive optimism of someone who still believes letters are lighter than they are. "You lads done?" he calls. "Nearly," you say, tying off the last of the Holborn district mail. "Give us 5 minutes and a miracle." The man laughs. "I'll take the 5 minutes. The miracles are above my pay grade." You glance up at the clock again. 6:20. The light filtering through the tall windows has changed, no longer pale, but glowing gold and smoky, filtered through 1,000 chimneys. Dust dances in the beams. glittering like the city's pulse. The final cart stands ready near the door, stacked with sorted mail, tied and labeled, perfect in its precision. You can't help feeling a small surge of pride. Against fatigue, fog, and chaos, you've made order. It's an oddly satisfying rebellion. Fairfax makes his last round of inspection, running a gloved finger along the topmost bundle as though checking for dust. "Good work," he says quietly. The compliment lands with the weight of gold. Thomas grins. "You hear that? We've entered the realm of adequacy." "Don't ruin it," you reply. Outside, the street is waking fully now. The muffled murmur of carts and hoofbeats grows louder, punctuated by the occasional cry of a newsboy hawking early editions. Through the glass, you can just see the outline of St. Paul's Dome, blurred by mist but solid against the lightening sky. Fairfax clears his throat. "Right. Let's get them out." The double doors swing open, and the cold morning air floods in. The sudden rush makes you blink, fresh and raw, smelling of smoke, horse dung, and the faint sweetness of baked bread from a nearby shop. Thomas exhales deeply. That's the smell of civilization. "Mostly the horses," you say, and he grins. The delivery men step forward, their satchels yawning open, their movements brisk and practiced. You help them load, bundles by district, carefully placed so that Westminster doesn't end up in Wapping. The weight of the sacks surprises you every time. Words, it turns out, are heavier than they look. One of the delivery men, a wiry veteran named Mr. Doolan, nods toward your stack. "You sorted that one?" You nod. He hefts it with a grunt. "You've got tidy hands, lad. Makes a difference out there." You smile faintly. "Glad to know my handwriting's better in bundles than on paper." He laughs and disappears into the morning with his cargo of correspondence, boots echoing on the cobblestones. You stand for a moment in the doorway, watching as the postmen fan out into the city like veins carrying lifeblood. Their red jackets flash briefly in the fog before blending into the London greys. Each carries hundreds of small destinies. Thomas joins you, sipping the last of his tea. You ever think about what happens after? After what? After they deliver them. After the letters are opened. Are people happier? Sadder? Or do they just toss them in the fire? You think for a moment. Probably all three. But for a little while, they are waiting. And that's something. He nods slowly, as if the idea pleases him. Back inside, the hall feels strangely empty without the mountain of mail. A few clerks are sweeping the floor, collecting stray scraps of paper. The echo of the morning rush lingers, like the aftertaste of thunder. You sit on the edge of your sorting table, rubbing your wrists. The candle wax from earlier has hardened into pale streaks. The tools of the trade, sorting knife, twine, ink pad, lie scattered like relics of a battle just won. Fairfax strides past again, though now his voice is softer. "All right, lads. Quick sweep before the next train arrives." Thomas groans theatrically. "And there I thought we'd earned a rest." "You'll rest when there's no mail left in Britain," Fairfax replies without looking back. "Never then," you mutter. "Exactly." The hall chuckles. It's the kind of tired laughter that comes only after survival. You glance at the clock again. 6:45. The hands keep moving, relentless, indifferent. But for a moment, just one, you let yourself feel still. The city outside is vast and loud and unpredictable, but in here, for a few precious minutes, everything makes sense. You pick up a stray envelope that's fallen to the floor. The address is faint, but you can just make out the words, "To the man who brings this, thank you." You smile, tuck it gently onto the outgoing cart, and whisper, "You're welcome." Then the doors close, and the next tide of mail begins to arrive. You know that feeling when the orchestra finishes its final note and the audience hasn't yet begun to clap? That's what the post office feels like right now, a breath held between exertion and renewal. The bundles are gone, the carts creak into the street, and for a fleeting heartbeat, silence rules the hall. Then the next wave begins. The door bangs open, and a gust of grey morning air brings with it a pair of porters pushing a trolley stacked with mailbags fresh from the Northern Line. The canvas glistens with dew, the labels streaked with soot. Each bag carries another chapter of the world's chatter. Love letters, overdue notices, ledgers, secrets, apologies. Fairfax doesn't even sigh. He simply adjusts his cuffs and barks, "Let's be quick about it. The sun's got no patience." You grab the nearest bag, your fingers half numb but automatic. The rough fibers scrape your skin as you slice it open. More letters spill out like snow in a paper storm, fluttering onto the table in uneven heaps. It's chaos again, but a familiar one, comforting in its predictability. Thomas trudges over, yawning wide enough to swallow a lamppost. "I had this wild dream I didn't work here," he says. You don't look up. That wasn't a dream, that was a hallucination of hope. He grins, flicking an envelope toward you like a playing card. It skids across the table and lands neatly atop your growing pile. "Catch." "Almost impressive," you reply. "Shame your aim with addresses isn't as sharp." He laughs, a short, wheezy sound that could be either amusement or fatigue. Around you, the hall hums back to life. The lamps hiss softly overhead, the floorboards creak in rhythm, and the distant sound of the city grows louder. Carriages clattering, shopkeepers raising shutters, a milkman calling out his morning greeting. The world is fully awake now, and so must you be. You rub your eyes and refocus on the tide of paper. Here's a fact you cling to like a lifeboat. By 1875, London's postmen were handling nearly 5 million letters a day. 5 million. You pause just long enough to let that sink in. That's 5 million confessions, instructions, lies, dreams, and overdue payments, all trusting in human hands not to lose them. Historians still argue whether this flood of correspondence was the true birth of modern bureaucracy or the beginning of mass intimacy, a love affair between a nation and its envelopes. You prefer the latter. It sounds more romantic. The rhythm returns to your fingers. Sort by district, then by street, then by number. The categories slide into place like the gears of a pocket watch. Somewhere between the piles, you find your trance. A thin envelope catches your eye. The paper is translucent and faintly pink, the handwriting slanted and looping with care. The stamp, blue, foreign, marks it as French. You can just make out the opening, "Mon cher Walter." You raise an eyebrow. "Someone's secret rendezvous again," you murmur. Thomas cranes his neck. "Careful, you'll fall in love by proxy." "I'll send her your regrets," you reply, sliding the letter to the correct bin. Historians still argue, he says mock seriously, whether all postmen are incurable romantics or just nosy. "I vote both," you answer. You reach for another sack, this one heavier than the rest. The tag reads "Official Documents, City Hall." That's the kind of bag that makes your spine straighten instinctively. Inside, the letters are thicker, embossed with seals, and reek faintly of self-importance. You handle them carefully. Bureaucracy may not love you, but it notices when you're careless. Across the hall, one of the newer clerks accidentally knocks over a stack of envelopes. They fan out across the floor like startled pigeons. A collective groan rises. Fairfax's moustache bristles. If those are unsorted, you'll pick them up in alphabetical order or perish trying. The poor lad scrambles to obey. You can't help but smile. It's cruel, yes, But it's the kind of cruelty born from exhaustion and the desire to keep the machinery intact. Everyone in this room has been that clumsy apprentice once. Thomas leans closer, lowering his voice. You know what I heard last week? Some post offices on the continent are using sorting machines. Mechanical arms, cranks, all clockwork. You blink. Machines? Doing our work. He nods, grinning like someone spreading a scandal. Apparently, they are faster. Can process twice the mail in half the time. You shake your head. And where's the poetry in that? Exactly, he says, though you suspect he wouldn't mind a little help. Historians still argue whether such early experiments ever truly worked or if they were just expensive gimmicks that made managers feel futuristic. Either way, the notion unsettles you. You look down at your ink-stained hands, hands that know the texture of every kind of envelope, the rhythm of every street name. Machines don't know that. They don't notice when someone's written a return address in the corner of an envelope because they were afraid it might not reach. You tighten your jaw and keep sorting. A fringe tidbit crosses your mind, one you once overheard at a pub. Some Victorians apparently believed that the constant movement of letters through the city created a sort of postal wind, a metaphysical current that connected hearts across distance. You laugh softly to yourself. Nonsense, of course, but charming nonsense. And perhaps, in a way, not entirely wrong. By the time the next hour passes, the piles have grown again. The hall, once a battlefield, is now an archive of order once more. You stretch your neck, feeling the bones click like tiny metronomes. Thomas yawns. I swear the mail breeds when no one's looking. You smirk. Then we're midwives to correspondence. He groans. You've been reading poetry again, haven't you? Blame the job. Handle enough love letters and it rubs off. Outside, the faint sound of church bells drifts through the open door, mingling with the hiss of rain beginning to fall. You glance up at the windows, drops race each other down the panes, distorting the light into streaks of liquid gold. The city, ever dramatic, chooses just this moment to weep. Fairfax checks his pocket watch, sighs, and mutters something about inevitable weather and unreliable timetables. Then, louder, all right, gentlemen. 10 minutes. Eat something, breathe something, then back to it. Thomas raises his hand. Can I breathe tea? Fairfax ignores him, which is as close to permission as you'll get. You follow Thomas toward the kettle, refilling your chipped mug. The steam rises into your face, softening the world for a moment. You sip, wincing at the taste, too strong, too bitter, but beautifully warm. As you drink, you look around the room. Everyone is bent over their piles, each man a small guardian of messages that aren't his. You realize, suddenly, that this is what civilization really is. Thousands of people moving words from one hand to another, trusting that meaning will survive the journey. Thomas nudges you. You're thinking again. You nod. Dangerous habit. Want to know my theory? He says, half smiling. We're not just sorting mail. We're holding time still, just for a heartbeat, so people can find each other again. You stare into your mug. That's almost profound. You feeling all right? He laughs, and the sound rings through the dusty air like a chime. You glance back at the piles waiting for you. More work. Always more. But beneath the exhaustion is something else. Something warm, steady, and just a little bit sacred. You wouldn't trade it for anything. The whistle blows again, faint but insistent. Another cart arriving. You sigh, set down your tea, and roll up your sleeves. All right, London, you murmur, let's dance again. The next wave of mail slams through the door like a gust of destiny wrapped in canvas. The porters grunt under its weight, boots slick with rain, and you feel the damp air snake its way up your sleeves again. The hall smells of steam, ink, and the faint metallic tang of morning. You blink against the haze and step forward to meet it. Another mountain of correspondence. Another round in the endless ballet of envelopes. You swear the letters breed when the lights flicker. Didn't we just clear all this? You mutter. Thomas, standing beside you, wipes his brow dramatically. You're assuming time passes linearly. It doesn't here. The post is eternal. You grin despite yourself. That explains the déjà vu. You both dive back in. Knives flash, cords snap, and the rhythm resumes. Sort, stack, bind, slide. The piles grow, shrink, and grow again. Outside, the rain turns heavier, drumming against the roof with the determined fury of unpaid bills. Historians still argue whether London's postal expansion in the 1870s truly democratized communication or simply buried people under the illusion of connection. Standing here, elbow deep in other people's lives, you'd say it's a bit of both. The city writes endlessly to itself, like a restless mind whispering in the dark. A letter flutters to the floor. You bend to pick it up, and something about it halts you. The envelope is tiny, barely larger than your palm, sealed with dark red wax stamped into the shape of a lion. The handwriting is elegant but trembling, as if the pen had been held by someone uncertain of their strength. The address reads, "To the postmaster, London. Please see this delivered with care." You frown. Technically, it's already delivered, to you. But curiosity, that occupational hazard, wins. You turn it over and notice a faint scent of lavender. Without breaking the seal, you can feel the weight of it, not paper, but intent. You place it gently on the supervisor's table. Some stories, you decide, aren't meant for your hands. Thomas peers over. What's that? A letter to the post itself, you say. Imagine that, writing a thank you note to a bureaucracy. He laughs. Now that's faith. You can't help but smile. Somewhere in London, someone believed in you enough to write that. It's absurd and beautiful all at once. The work resumes its feverish rhythm. Bundles rise and fall, and time begins to blur again. The clatter of carts, the hiss of gas lamps, the shuffle of boots, it's all one continuous hum. You move through it like a cog in a divine mechanism. A fact drifts through your mind as you work. In 1871, the London District Post introduced up to 12 deliveries per day. 12. That means a love letter could be written at breakfast, read at lunch, and answered before supper. The Victorian heart beat fast, and, apparently, punctual. Thomas whistles when you share this. 12 deliveries? No wonder no one had time for feelings. They were too busy posting them. Exactly, you reply, slipping another bundle into its bin. Across the room, Fairfax supervises like a silent hawk, his moustache twitching in tempo with the ticking wall clock. His perfectionism borders on art. You once heard a rumor, probably true, that he writes anonymous letters to test his own staff. It would fit his sense of justice, or mischief, or both. The sound of tearing paper draws your attention. One of the younger clerks, Henry, has just ripped an envelope by accident. He freezes, guilt spreading across his face. Inside, a folded newspaper clipping peeks out, a column titled "Lost and Found, Notices of the Heart." Thomas leans over your shoulder. "Oh, the romance section," he murmurs, grinning. You think anyone actually finds their lost loves through those? Historians still argue, you reply with mock gravity, whether those notices ever worked or were just Victorian performance art. Either way, he says, they gave us something to gossip about. Henry blushes and hurries to repair the envelope with wax. You hand him a new stamp, Queen Victoria's disapproving face glowering from its corner, and nod approvingly. "Let Her Majesty bless your second attempt," you joke. By now, your shoulders ache like they've been nailed in place. You roll them back, trying to stretch the knots out, and take a long breath. The air tastes faintly metallic, ink, steam, maybe even a hint of blood from a careless paper cut. You look up at the high windows. The rain has slowed, but the clouds linger low and thick, pressing on the city like a heavy hand. The gas lamps inside cast halos of amber around every movement, softening even Fairfax's edges. The world feels suspended, half real, half dream. Thomas hums something tuneless beside you, an old marching song turned lullaby by fatigue. "You ever wonder," he asks suddenly, "what the letters say about us?" You blink. "Us." "The postman," he says. "We touch thousands of them, but none are ours. Somewhere out there, someone must be writing about a postman. Maybe even this one." You chuckle. "If they are, I hope they make us taller." "Speak for yourself," he says, patting his chest. "I've got heroic posture." You glance at his slouched frame. "You've got heroic delusion." He grins, unfazed. The bell clangs twice, an announcement. Fairfax clears his throat. "Gentlemen, we've a special delivery, urgent packet to the General Post Office, St. Martin's-le-Grand. Needs a volunteer to escort it." You exchange glances with Thomas. "Should we?" he asks. "Why not?" you reply. "We've earned a bit of weather." Fairfax nods at you both, then hands over a leather case sealed with wax and ribbon. "Straight there, no detours. And mind yourselves, the streets are slick." The case is heavier than it looks, humming faintly with importance. You sling it under your arm and step into the morning. The city greets you with damp cobblestones, dripping gutters, and the rhythmic clop of horses. The air is cold enough to make your teeth ache. You and Thomas fall into step, your boots splashing through shallow puddles that mirror the faint glow of street lamps. "Feels strange," he says softly, "to be carrying something that might matter." You nod. Everything matters to someone. You pass a row of shops opening for the day, bakers setting out trays of steaming bread, a bookseller brushing rain from his awning, a flower vendor arranging blooms that look like little explosions of color in the gray. London, even wet, refuses to be dull. As you turn toward St. Martin's, a newspaper boy shouts the headlines: "New postal rates. Cheaper letters. Faster trains." The words echo off the brick walls. You can't help smiling. The world is always finding new ways to talk to itself. By the time you reach the General Post Office, your coat is soaked through and your hands are stiff. The great building looms ahead, columns dark with rain, its entrance flanked by two gas lamps that burn like tired eyes. You step inside, deliver the case, and exchange brief nods with the clerks there. No one asks what's inside. No one needs to. On the way back, Thomas breaks the silence. "You think we'll ever run out of words?" You shake your head. "Not while people still have things they're afraid to say out loud." He smiles at that, a soft, sleepy smile. "Then I suppose we'll never be unemployed." You both laugh, and the sound mingles with the hiss of the rain, fading into the rhythm of the waking city. When you return to the sorting hall, the air is thick again with motion and murmur. Another tide of letters waits. You hang your dripping coat on its hook and roll up your sleeves once more. "All right," you whisper, half to the mail, half to yourself, "round two." You're barely through the doorway before Fairfax's voice cuts through the murmur like a paper knife through thin envelope glue. "About time," he says, not looking up from his clipboard. "The city doesn't wait for heroes." You salute him with exaggerated formality, dripping water onto the floor. Then it's lucky it has bureaucrats to keep it punctual. Thomas snorts behind you, earning a glare from Fairfax that could curdle milk. You hang your soaked coat on the nearest hook, wring out your cap, and watch a small puddle form beneath it. The hall smells stronger now, ink and damp wool, wet boots, and the faint musk of effort. Steam curls from kettles lined up along a side table, their handles rattling like nervous bones. Someone's brought in a tray of stale buns, which vanishes in 30 seconds flat. The post bags are smaller now, but they keep coming. You've long stopped counting the hours. Time has dissolved into the rhythm of shuffling paper, clicking twine, stamping seals. Your body moves on memory alone. Thomas tosses you a fresh stack of envelopes. "We're famous," he says between yawns. "Just heard one of the clerks mention the two madmen who took a special run through the rain." You smirk. Better mad than mediocre. The envelopes are slick with condensation, their corners curling from damp. You sort them carefully, your fingertips finding that meditative groove again. Index, thumb, slide, stack, shift. You could do this blindfolded by now. There's a soft thunk behind you, one of the great metal stamps hitting the inking pad. The sound reverberates through the room like a heartbeat. Each stamp marks another letter's permission to exist. It strikes you, as it sometimes does in quiet moments like this, how strange the entire ritual is. Tens of thousands of people, most of whom will never meet, are connected by a system of trust built on paper, ink, and faith in men like you. Historians still argue whether the post was the truest symbol of the Victorian era, industry wedded to intimacy. You lean toward yes. Thomas interrupts your reverie with a low whistle. "You ever think about how many secrets pass through our hands every day?" "All the time," you reply, though most of them are probably about cats or debts. He grins. "Still. Imagine if we read them all." You raise an eyebrow. "Would either go mad or fall in love with half of London?" Both sound like solid options. You chuckle and keep sorting. A fringe tidbit floats to mind, one you heard once from an old postman who'd worked the docks. He swore that some sailors, unable to read or write, would pay postal clerks a penny to compose letters home on their behalf. The clerks, he said, sometimes added a few kind words of their own, softening the edges of truth. It wasn't just mail, it was mercy, disguised as ink. You picture one of those letters, a rough hand guiding a finer one, words bridging a gulf of distance and fear. It's hard not to smile at the thought. "Hey," Thomas says suddenly, holding up an envelope. "Look at this." It's addressed in elaborate script to Miss Eliza Fairchild, somewhere near Holborn Viaduct, London. No number, no street name. Just somewhere. You whistle. That's a romantic gamble if I've ever seen one. Thomas flips it over. Sealed tight. Lavender scent. You think it'll find her? Historians still argue, you say, whether love or the post is the greater miracle. He laughs, slides it into the undeliverable box, and wipes his hands on his trousers. The hours drag. The candles gutter low. The gaslight flickers, haloing the edges of everyone's fatigue. It's quiet now, save for the shuffle of envelopes and the occasional cough. You're deep in the rhythm when you notice something odd. Fairfax is sitting. He never sits. He's perched at his desk, spectacles low on his nose, studying a letter like it holds the meaning of life. You can't help but watch. He reads, then folds it carefully, sealing it back up with deliberate precision. His moustache twitches once, and for the briefest second, you swear he looks almost human. Thomas notices too. Think he's got a sweetheart? You grin. If he does, she must be terrifying. Fairfax clears his throat, as though the air itself has grown too curious. Back to work, he says, not meeting anyone's eyes. You oblige, but the moment lingers, proof that even the most iron-spined bureaucrat might harbor a heart wrapped in parchment. Outside, the rain has eased, leaving behind the faint hiss of wet streets. Through the high windows, you catch a sliver of pale light, the first blush of dawn breaking through the soot. The world is waking again. Thomas rubs his eyes. We've been here since yesterday. Time's a flat envelope, you murmur. He chuckles weakly. And we're stuck inside it. The bell rings again, startlingly loud. Fairfax rises, his clipboard held like a scepter. Gentlemen, morning collection in 15 minutes. Prepare the outbound carts. The words jolt everyone into action. You move without thinking. Gather, tie, label, stack. The mail becomes a living current again, flowing toward the doors in thick bundles. The familiar urgency fills the air. Fatigue turns into adrenaline, chaos into choreography. A porter calls out, "Southwark ready." Another shouts, "Bloomsbury complete." Thomas hoists a bundle nearly his own size. Remind me again why we didn't become florists. Less suspense, you reply, helping him load it onto the cart. Flowers don't carry scandal. True, he says, but they also don't talk back. The hall swells with motion, voices overlapping in the metallic clang of trolleys and chains. The rhythm builds to that familiar crescendo, the final rush before the city's pulse absorbs you again. And then, just like that, it's done. The carts roll out. The doors swing shut. Silence seeps back in, slow and gentle. You lean against a table, breathing deeply, letting your heartbeat catch up with the quiet. Around you, the men slump into chairs or onto piles of sacking, exhausted but satisfied. Fairfax surveys the room, nods once, and says simply, "Good." One word, but it lands like an accolade. Thomas groans, stretching his arms. "Good," he says. As if we just rearranged the furniture instead of civilization. You grin. "We'll put it on our tombstones, 'Here lies a postman.' He sorted well." The room laughs softly, a weary, genuine sound. You sit down, rubbing your wrists, and glance at the clock. The hands have circled all the way round again, as if mocking the very idea of progress. You've spent another night carrying the world's words from chaos into clarity. For a moment, you feel it, the quiet pride, the almost sacred fatigue. Outside, London stirs, and soon you'll join it again, boots on cobblestones, letters against your heart. But for now, you just sit, listening to the echo of paper settling into stillness. The silence doesn't last long. It never does. The postal hall is like the tide, quiet only long enough to trick you into lowering your guard. Then it surges again. You're half dozing on the edge of your stool when the next sound comes, the deep, metallic rumble of a handcart being wheeled over the cobblestones outside. Someone's shouting through the fog, voice muffled but urgent. "Special consignment. Incoming for immediate sort." You groan softly. "Of course," you mutter. Heaven forbid London goes 10 minutes without a new crisis. Thomas, sprawled on a sack beside you, lifts one eyelid. "Tell them to write slower." But duty calls, and you drag yourself upright. The cold air slaps your face awake as the doors open once more. In rolls a new stack of canvas bags, stamped Express, provincial correspondence. The porters look as tired as you feel. Fairfax appears like a summoned spirit. "Right, everyone back up. We've got Manchester and Birmingham letters delayed by fog, half the nation's temper in these sacks, so be quick." You exchange a look with Thomas. "We should charge extra for emotional damage." He snorts. "We already are, paid in exhaustion." The two of you haul a bag onto the table and slice it open. Letters pour out like a flood of pale fish, slippery, shining, alive. It's a beautiful sight in a grim sort of way. Historians still argue, Thomas murmurs, whether we're preserving civilization or drowning in it. Both, you reply. It depends on the weather. The smell of wet paper fills the air, sharp and sweet. The lamps hum overhead, their light tinted by the haze. You fall into rhythm once again, sort, slide, tie, stamp, repeat. Each movement is muscle memory now, a ritual as sacred as morning prayer. Halfway through the first sack, something unusual catches your eye, a stack of pamphlets bound in string, edges singed slightly as though they've seen fire. You glance at the top one, Votes for Women, a Taste for Equality. You blink. Well, you murmur, that's going to cause conversation. Thomas looks over, eyebrows raised. They're sending political tracts through the post again. Apparently. You flip one over and notice it's addressed to a gentleman's club near Fleet Street. Poor fellows won't know what hit them. He laughs. Historians still argue whether the post spread ideas faster than newspapers. You might just be holding proof. You grin, sliding the pamphlets aside. The post doesn't discriminate. Love letters and revolutions travel in the same sack. As the hours drag, the light changes again. Morning has fully arrived, gray and hazy but stubbornly bright. Through the tall windows, you can see people scurrying through puddles, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. You pause, letting your gaze rest on the city. It looks alive, impatient, bustling, infinitely complicated. And somewhere out there, every letter you've sorted today will soon arrive in someone's hands. A knock on a door, a thank you, a momentary spark of connection. Thomas notices your faraway look. Thinking poetic thoughts again. Just wondering how many people out there are waiting right now, you say. For news, for love, for money, for anything. He nods slowly. It's strange, isn't it? We know the shape of their waiting, even if we'll never know their names. That hits deeper than either of you expect. You both lapse into silence for a while, the only sound the whisper of paper and the low clatter of the stamping machine. You think of another fringe tidbit, an old superstition whispered by rural postmen. They claimed that the last letter of the day carried the sender's soul for a moment, and whoever delivered it shared a piece of that life. You don't believe in such things, not really, but you do wonder if the constant tide of human emotion leaves a residue. Maybe that's what this job is. Collecting ghosts made of ink. Fairfax's footsteps echo again, crisp as punctuation. He inspects the piles, nods once, and moves on without a word. Approval, in his language, is silence. The room grows warmer as the lamps burn on. Sweat trickles down your neck despite the cold outside. The mingled smells of oil, ink, and damp cloth cling to everything. You reach for another stack and notice a small envelope that's clearly been resealed. The wax is uneven, the paper crinkled where fingers once pried it open. You glance at Thomas. Tampered mail, you murmur. He leans in. Thieves. Or curiosity, you say. They're cousins. You hold it up to the light and catch a faint outline of handwriting inside. Nothing legible, but unmistakably personal. You sigh and toss it into the inspection tray. Fairfax can deal with that one. I'm not starting my prison sentence before lunch. Thomas grins. Historians still argue whether postmen were saints or sinners. Guess it depends which letter they opened. The day presses on, and your muscles begin to protest. The sharp smell of sealing wax now feels like a lullaby, comforting in its constancy. You barely notice when the bells from St. Paul's drift faintly through the mist, announcing another hour. At one point, Thomas hums again, that same tuneless melody he always falls back on when tired. You join him, just to keep the sound alive. The low harmony fills the space between you, something human against the clatter of bureaucracy. Fairfax passes by once more, gives you both a sidelong look, and mutters, "If you must sing, keep it in key." Was that humor? Thomas whispers when he's gone. "I think so," you reply. "We should alert the newspapers." You keep working until the bags are empty again, until the tables are once more bare and the floor littered only with snippets of twine and crumbs from those unfortunate buns. The hall looks strangely peaceful, like a battlefield after victory. Thomas wipes his hands on his coat. Another morning conquered. You nod, too tired to joke. And tomorrow, another siege. He stretches, yawning so wide it's contagious. Do you think anyone will ever remember us? The people who moved the words. You look at the door, at the faint outline of sunlight beyond it. Maybe not by name, you say. But every story needs a messenger. That's enough. He nods slowly, as if the thought settles something in him. Outside, a new whistle sounds, the arrival of the mid-morning train. You both glance toward the door, waiting for the next load, and you can't help but laugh softly. You ever get the feeling, you say, that the post office is the beating heart of London? Thomas grins. If it is, we're the poor fools keeping it from cardiac arrest. Cheers to that. You clink your tin mugs together, sip the lukewarm dregs of tea, and turn once more toward the endless tide of letters. Because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. And in this city of ceaseless words, there's no nobler thing than making sure every one of them finds its way home. The afternoon sunlight begins to crawl across the sorting hall floor like a tired traveler who's lost his way. The edges of every shadow seem to soften, and for the first time all day, the air feels a little looser, like someone has quietly toned down the volume of London itself. You stay seated a moment longer, elbows on the table, eyes half-lidded. Around you, the other postmen are drifting towards stillness, some slumped against walls, others nodding over mugs of half-cold tea. The energy that once pulsed through the room has finally burnt itself out. Even the stamping machines, those little mechanical tyrants, have gone mute. Thomas exhales beside you, the sound somewhere between a sigh and a wheeze. "You hear that?" he murmurs. You tilt your head. "What?" He smiles faintly. "Exactly." Silence. The rarest thing in this hall. The only sound now is the soft creak of rafters and the distant drip of rainwater still sliding off the eaves outside. You can almost feel the building itself relaxing, like it's taken a deep breath for the first time since midnight. Fairfax moves quietly across the floor, coat over his arm, clipboard finally tucked under it instead of in his hand. Without the sharpness of orders in his voice, he looks oddly smaller, less like a foreman and more like a man. He pauses by your table. "Good work, both of you," he says simply, and the words hang in the air like a small benediction. Then he's gone, boots fading down the corridor. Thomas blinks at you. "Was that a compliment?" You nod solemnly. "Mark the date. History will need evidence." A low laugh ripples through the few men still conscious. Someone whistles, a tune that drifts lazily through the hall, and the sound of it makes the shadows feel gentler somehow. You glance around at the space you've practically lived in for the past day. The sorting tables, their surfaces rubbed smooth by decades of letters. The hanging scales, their brass edges dull with fingerprints. The towering pigeonhole walls that stretch toward the rafters like silent libraries. You know every knot in the wood, every dent in the tabletops. It's all strangely beautiful now that the chaos has ended, like seeing the backstage of a grand theater after the play has finished. You lean back and close your eyes. The smell of ink and paper still lingers, but softer now, like a memory fading at the edges. Your body hums with exhaustion, but there's a quiet satisfaction underneath it, a warmth that's almost enough to erase the ache in your shoulders. Thomas stretches out beside you, boots crossed on the table. "Think we'll ever get replaced by machines?" he asks, eyes half closed. You smile without opening yours. Historians still argue whether progress ever really replaces people or just changes the shape of the work. Meaning that even if a machine can sort 1,000 letters an hour, it can't smell the rain on them or guess which ones were written with shaking hands. He hums softly, thoughtful. "Yeah, machines don't daydream either." "Not yet," you say. "But when they do, I hope they dream of us." A pause. Then, softly, Thomas chuckles. "You're a poet trapped in a postman's coat." You smirk. "And you're an optimist trapped in boots 2 sizes too big." He glances down at his boots and wiggles them. "True. But they are warmer than poetry." The light fades further, gold sliding toward amber, amber into gray. A few lamps are lit again, more for comfort than necessity. The hall looks almost cozy now, if one ignores the heaps of canvas bags and the faint smell of sweat. Outside, the city begins to hum in a lower register. Carriages rattle somewhere in the distance, street vendors shout in the fog. The post office, for once, is not the center of the storm but a quiet island floating inside it. You rise slowly, feeling every joint complain. The floorboards groan beneath you as you walk toward the far wall where the old clock ticks in lazy circles. Its brass pendulum sways like a heartbeat in slow motion. You realize that the rhythm you've been chasing all night, the endless urgency, the chaos, the movement, has finally aligned with your own breathing. For a moment, you're tempted to stay right here forever, listening to the heartbeat of the hall as it drifts into stillness. Thomas joins you, carrying 2 mugs of tea that steam weakly. He hands you one and nods toward the ceiling beams. You ever notice how quiet it gets after everyone leaves? Like the building's holding its breath. You take a sip. The tea is more metallic than herbal, but you're beyond caring. "Maybe it's waiting," you say, "for the next wave of words." Do you ever think about all the stories that never make it? The ones lost in floods or fires or plain bad luck? You nod slowly. Sometimes. But maybe they find other ways to be told. One of those stories you once heard from an old clerk who retired before you started. He swore that every undelivered letter ended up in a secret archive beneath Mount Pleasant, guarded by men who'd memorized their contents so they wouldn't vanish from the world entirely. Nonsense, probably, but a comforting kind of nonsense. Thomas raises an eyebrow. "You believe that?" "Not really," you say, "but I like to imagine it. A whole underground city of forgotten words." He nods approvingly. "If I end up haunting anywhere, that's where I'll go." The two of you laugh quietly, the sound bouncing off the wooden rafters. As you sip the last of your tea, you notice the lamplight beginning to shimmer faintly against the windows, London fog creeping back in, drawn by the chill of evening. The gaslight outside glows in soft halos, blurring the edges of the street into a watercolor of motion. One by one, the others file out, boots echoing down the long corridor. Some offer nods, others half smiles. The camaraderie is unspoken but palpable. Everyone knows they've survived another day in the ceaseless rhythm of the post. You linger until the hall is almost empty. Only a few letters remain on the table, stragglers waiting for tomorrow's run. You pick one up, turn it over in your fingers. The paper is smooth and cool. The address is written in an elegant, looping hand. You don't open it, of course, but for a brief second, you let yourself imagine what it might contain: a confession, a goodbye, a promise. You set it down gently. Thomas yawns. "We'll be back here in a few hours, won't we?" You nod. The mail never sleeps. It just takes naps. He grins, pulling on his coat. Then I'll take a page out of its book. You watch him go, his footsteps fading into the growing quiet. And for the first time since the night began, you find yourself alone. The sorting hall stretches before you, a cathedral of correspondence, every shadow shaped by words. You walk slowly between the tables, running your fingers over the grain of the wood, feeling the grooves worn smooth by generations before you. You can almost hear their voices, a faint murmur of lives long folded into dust and letters. You pause at the doorway, glance back once more. The lamps flicker softly. The silence hums with memory. Then you close the door behind you, leaving the hall to its slumber. Outside, London exhales a long, misty sigh. The cobblestones glisten beneath your boots, and somewhere far off, a bell tolls the hour. You adjust your satchel, empty now, and start the slow walk home. The city is quieter than you've ever heard it, every window glowing with the warmth of 1,000 untold stories. You smile to yourself. Another night's work, another world of words delivered, lost, and reborn. And above you, the sky hangs low and grey, like an old envelope waiting to be opened. You don't so much wake as drift upward through the grey fog of half-sleep, the same way the morning light creeps over rooftops that never asked for it. The city hums faintly beyond your window, carts rolling, boots striking stone, the faint whistle of an impatient constable. But beneath it all there's something else, a steady rhythm that has followed you from the hall to your dreams, the shuffle of paper, the heartbeat of letters. You rise slowly, joints stiff but loyal. The kettle sputters its first sigh of steam as you pull on your uniform once again. The wool smells faintly of damp and ink, as though it never stopped working even while you slept. You smile to yourself, a little bleary, and mutter, "Another round, then." The walk back to the post office feels softer this time. London is still wrapped in its shawl of morning fog, but the air tastes cleaner after the night's rain. Your boots echo across puddles that mirror pale slivers of sky. Shopkeepers are unlatching their doors, brushing coal dust off windows, yawning into the day. Somewhere, someone drops a tray of bread, and the crash sounds absurdly like applause. When you reach the sorting hall, the world feels oddly suspended, caught between yesterday's exhaustion and today's renewal. The great iron doors creak open to reveal the familiar space, bathed in the delicate gold of early light. For once, it doesn't look like chaos waiting to happen. It looks peaceful. You step inside. The air is cool, the tables bare except for a few forgotten envelopes. Your fingers itch with the reflex to tidy them. There's a soft cough behind you. Fairfax stands in the doorway, holding a stack of ledgers. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes seem less severe in the morning light. "You're early," he says. "So are you," you reply. He nods once. "Can't trust the night crew to balance the tallies. Thought I'd check them myself." He hesitates a moment, then adds, "Good work last night." "Truly." It's such an uncharacteristic phrase that you almost laugh, but you just nod. "Thank you, sir." He clears his throat awkwardly. London's growing faster than any of us can keep pace. Some say the mail's become its bloodstream. If so, we'd better keep the pulse steady. You grin faintly. Wouldn't want a citywide heart attack. Fairfax allows himself the smallest of smiles before disappearing toward his office. The sound of his footsteps fades into the echoing distance, leaving you with the quiet again. You wander among the tables, fingertips tracing old grooves. Every mark here tells a story. The nick where someone dropped a knife slicing open a stubborn sack, the faint scorch mark from a candle overturned in haste, the dent where a heavy parcel once landed. The hall isn't just a workplace, it's a living archive of labor and memory. Historians still argue whether the post made Britain smaller or larger, whether by connecting everyone, it shrank distance, or by flooding every corner with correspondence, it made the world feel wider. You suspect both are true. Letters don't just travel. They stretch space, stitching emotions across miles. You remember something Thomas said in jest, that machines might one day replace you all. It doesn't frighten you, not really. Every age finds its messengers, even if they are made of gears instead of bone. What matters is the message, the reaching out, the act of care disguised as bureaucracy. A fringe tidbit floats to mind. Years from now, collectors will pay fortunes for rare Victorian envelopes, preserving them behind glass. Not for their content, which is often lost, but for their stamps, for the faint fingerprint of a vanished hand. The thought makes you smile. You are, in your own quiet way, part of something immortal. The doors creak again, and Thomas enters, looking only slightly less bedraggled than usual. "You're early," he says. "Fairfax already beat me to it," you reply. "He even said something nice." Thomas blinks. "Should we alert the papers?" "Already considered it." He chuckles and sets down his satchel. "I brought buns. Edible this time." You accept one gratefully. It's stale, but in the way that food becomes sacred when shared among the sleepless. You eat in companionable silence, the sunlight edging higher with each bite. "Strange thing," Thomas says after a while, "how letters keep going even when we stop. Whole conversations still moving through the streets while we sleep." You nod. The city talks to itself in envelopes. "Think anyone's listening?" You shrug. "Always. Even if they don't know it." He seems to like that. You both lapse into another long silence, the comfortable kind. The lamps flicker as they cool, and dust motes drift like slow fireworks through the morning light. You glance at the nearest pigeonhole wall, empty now, waiting for its next flood. It reminds you of longs between breaths. You speak softly, almost to yourself. "Funny how we spend our lives moving other people's words, but never stop to think what ours would say." Thomas leans back, smiling faintly. "Maybe we don't need to. Maybe the act is enough." You consider that. The work, the motion, the endless tide, it's exhausting, yes, but it's also beautiful. Every letter, a fragment of a stranger's heartbeat. Every route, a thread in a vast unseen web. You've been part of that web for years, and somehow it still humbles you. The bells from St. Paul's toll again, clearer now, ringing across the rooftops like a promise. Thomas stands, brushing crumbs from his coat. Another day begins. You follow him toward the door. The city awaits, streets slick with dew, air full of promise and soot in equal measure. Somewhere, a baker's cart rattles by. Somewhere else, a newsboy shouts headlines about Parliament and Empire. And beyond all of it, 100,000 doors are waiting for the sound of your knock. You sling your satchel across your shoulder. It's lighter now, but soon it will swell again with words, emotions, and all the quiet chaos that keeps London alive. As you step outside, you glance once more at the hall behind you. The light through the tall windows glows warm, soft, and almost holy. The sorting hall sleeps, but not for long. Its dreams, you suspect, are made of rustling paper. You smile and turn toward the street, boots finding their rhythm on the cobblestones. The fog curls around your ankles like a friendly cat. Each step feels lighter, as if the burden of all those letters, those tiny miracles of communication, has somehow carried you instead. You breathe deeply, tasting the coal, the mist, the faint sweetness of morning buns from a nearby stall. The city's heartbeat joins your own. You are the messenger, the ghost, the ink-stained bridge between worlds. And even as new inventions rise, as the future presses impatiently at the door, there will always be someone, somewhere, waiting for a letter. And someone else, like you, ready to deliver it. The rhythm slows now, the city's noise fading to a soft hum. You let the image of the post hall settle in your mind one last time. The rows of tables empty, the lamps dim, the faint echo of boots on stone receding into sleep. The air there is cool and still, scented faintly with ink and patience. Imagine the letters, all of them, drifting through the night. Some in sacks on trains, some tucked beneath coats, some waiting in candlelit windowsills. Each one a whisper of connection, crossing the dark to find its home. Your breathing slows to match their pace. The clatter of carts and footsteps dissolves, leaving only the pulse of your own heartbeat, steady as a sorting clock. The fog outside turns to silver mist, then to soft nothingness. The noise of London recedes behind closed doors, until all that remains is quiet. You can still feel the rough paper beneath your fingertips, the warmth of the tea between your hands, the gentle weight of duty that somehow comforts more than it tires. The work is done. The mail is delivered. The world, for this small moment, is complete. And as you drift, imagine one last envelope addressed simply to you. No street, no number, just your name, carried by the slow breath of the night. Inside, only 2 words: rest well. Sweet dreams.